Hello and welcome back, Year 8. A slightly different start than the one that we had envisaged before we broke up before Christmas, but nevertheless, we have been here before and we know what to do in this second lockdown. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the start of this lesson just going through perhaps the new expectations and the way that we're going to be doing our online learning before kind of talking through our new topic of World War One, which I know is lots of your favourite topics. So we're really excited to be starting the new term with this exciting topic of World War One. So your lessons will consist of the following. We'll review previous learning. So that might be through quizzes on Show My Homework or quizzes within the lessons themselves. But this is something that we're all used to doing already. You should expect to have feedback once per week as part of a Loom video. We will be introducing new content via Loom video or information sheets or through information videos. And of course, there will be tasks to complete using this new content. Once every other week, there will be an offline lesson. And this is where we don't provide Loom videos or live lessons via Microsoft Teams. During the lessons, there will be points in which you'll be asked to pause and take a moment to either take notes or to complete a task. The really good thing about Loom videos is that you can rewind and re-listen to the information again if you weren't sure or did not understand what was being asked. And then you can watch an explanation or instruction again. Please be aware that I am always online during your lessons. So if you're not sure, you've rewatched the videos and you're not sure what is being asked, you can always contact your teacher and ask for some clarification or a better explanation of the content. So just to set it out, my expectations, so make sure all work is completed on time and make sure that work is completed to the best of your ability, which I am sure you will do. Again, to re-emphasise, please ask me if you are stuck or unsure about anything, and I will be able to get back to you as soon as possible. What I can promise you is that we'll provide, as a department, as a history department, we will provide well-planned lessons that ensure that you learn and make great progress through your study of history in Year 8. We'll also, and an important part of this, is providing useful feedback on your work so you can keep getting better at your study of history. So where are we now? So we have been, through Year 7 and through Year 8, been studying history in a chronological order. Okay? Lots of you already know what the word chronological means, in time order. So in Year 7, you might have already covered 1066, the Battle of Hastings, perhaps covered medieval England. We talked about the Magna Carta and the Crusades and Thomas Becket and the Black Death, and we were doing that just before the first lockdown in March. And then we moved on to early modern England, and we did this during lockdown from March through to the summer holidays, where we studied Tudors, Stuarts, and English Civil War. And just as you started Year 8, we moved on to 1700 to 1900. We looked at industrial England, looked at the Industrial Revolution, slavery, and empire. And here we are now, 1900 to present. We're looking at World War One, and this should take us up to the February half term. And then we will look at women's rights and how women gained the vote. And then we'll move on to World War Two, and finally finishing off in the summer term about the Middle East. Okay, so all very exciting topics ahead of us, and lots, as I said before, lots of people's favourite topics: World War One, World War Two, women's rights, the Middle East. Lots of people find these very interesting. So to start off, I'd like you to pause the video here take a moment to write the title, so Introduction to World War One, underline the title, and then complete the 2 recall quizzes, which are on Show My Homework already. These recall quizzes, you should expect, will always form the part of your Do It Now task. And they will be either based on previous learning, from the lesson before, or from perhaps a topic before. So take a moment to pause this video and complete those 2 tasks. Great. As always, our lessons are part of or help to inform a bigger question. And the bigger question, the big overarching question for our lesson, for our next lessons on World War One, is why was World War One seen as a new kind of war? So again, just take a moment to pause this video and write out in your book the big question. The big question, why was World War One seen as a new kind of war? And we can keep coming back to this at later during our course. So leave yourself a little bit of space around this question so we can keep referring back to it. Great. Also, when we study history, we not only have a big question, which all our lessons feed into, but we also have big themes as well, which our lessons also feed into. Can you remember what they are? Take a moment to write them down, and then, if you can, what do they mean? So take 5 minutes to complete this task. I will give you the first one, cultural encounters. Brilliant. Okay, and now you can check your answers. So you can pause the video, check your answers, and if you have not got them correct, then correct and adjust your answers. So taking us back to the big question, why was World War One seen as a new kind of war? The lessons that will inform this big question will follow as such. So lesson 1, which is today's lesson, will really be a bit of an introduction. We'll set the scene, if you would like, for World War One, introducing some of the key concepts that we'll need to study World War One. Lesson 2, we'll look at some of the long-term causes of World War Two. Lesson 3, sorry, I should have changed that. How did a sandwich spark a war? Lesson 4, did all British men rush to join the army at the start of World War One, where we look at the role of soldiers and conscription during World War One. The next lesson we'll look at the extent of fighting in World War One, particularly looking at trench warfare. The next lesson, staged or real, how can we check which World War One photographs are the real thing? And this is where we do a little bit of source work. Next lesson, how important were men from the Empire for Britain winning World War One? And the final lesson, how different were soldiers' experience of injury, sickness and medical treatment during the Great War? And then following this, as I said before, will take us up to February half term, and following this we should be able to answer the big question of why was World War One seen as a new kind of war? And we'll be looking at not only just the fighting as a new kind of war, but also things like medical treatments, which advanced drastically during this time period. And lots of other factors as well. Our learning intentions for today are to introduce World War One, to understand some of the key terms linked to the topic, and to understand the location of some of the key events of World War One. But before we move on, these are some of the key words that we'll need for today's lesson, but also for our following lessons as well. So I would like you to write these words down in your book and match the correct definition with the words. So you'll need to pause the video here as you write the words and match the correct definition. Brilliant! You can now check your answers. Did you get them all correct? do you already know about World War One? World War One is a very popular topic, and you might already have a lot of previous knowledge from primary school or just from your own independent research. So again, just take a moment, take 5 minutes, pause the video and write a list or perhaps create a spider diagram about all the things you already know about World War One. The pictures below might help inform you with your knowledge. There's some other questions here to consider as well. How do you know these things? And what do you still want to know? Which we'll move on to in a minute. So take 5 minutes, create a spider diagram or a set of bullet points in a list form of the things you already know about World War One. Excellent. Probably know quite a bit about World War One already. So moving on from what you already know, but what questions do you have about World War One? As you watch this clip about World War One, try to think of any questions you might have and what do you want to know. Set yourself at least one question and write this in your book. And then we will return to this question later on in the topic, and hopefully you should be able to answer your question. Okay, so I hope that video helps to perhaps prompt some questions that you might have about World War One. So remember, write that question down. So at least one question, write this in your book, and we'll return to it later on, and we might be able to, and hopefully we should be able to answer that question at the end of the study of World War One. So again, we're going to get some general information, some key facts about World War One. So I'd like you to pause this video and write these questions into your book. Write these questions into your book, and then as we're watching the video, answer these questions. Okay, I estimate this task, all in all, should take you about 10 minutes. Great, so you have answered, written down all of the questions. I'm going to play you a short video here about World War One, which will hopefully be able to provide you with some key information.
War One, also known as the First World War, was a global war centered in Europe that began on 28th of July 1914 and lasted until the 11th of November 1918. The war lasted exactly 4 years, 3 months and 14 days. Before World War II began in 1939, World War I was called the Great War, the World War, or the War to End All Wars. 135 countries took part in World War I, and more than 15 million people died. In this video, we're going to cover lots of facts and information about World War I. The conflict involved nearly all of the biggest powers in the world and was focused around two alliances, the Allies and the Central Powers. The countries of the Allies included Russia, France, the British Empire, Italy, United States, Japan, Romania, Serbia, Belgium, Greece, Portugal and Montenegro. The Central Powers included Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey and Bulgaria. Some of these World War I facts are incredible and very interesting when you consider that the events happened in very recent history. World War I began.
Okay, so pause the video here and maybe you should be able to answer these questions. Remember, with Loom recordings, it's the really good thing about Loom is that you can pause and rewind and re-watch the video so that you can catch up on any information that you might have missed. Brilliant. So hopefully you've answered all of those questions from the previous slide. So you have a good foundation of some of the key facts or general information around World War I. So to give it a little bit of context about the location of World War I, World War I, or the First World War, is a global war. So global war involved 135 countries from across the world. However, the war, or World War I, originated in Europe and lasted from the 28th of July 1914 to the 11th of November 1918. Sometimes this war, or World War I, is called the Great War, or the war to end all wars. So I've circled Europe within the red circle, and this is often described as the origins of World War I. And we will learn about that next lesson and the lesson afterwards. Okay, before we get to, so again, we're just setting the context of World War I. And our next task is to identify the key countries involved in World War I within Europe. So your first task is to name the countries. So if you write out the numbers 1 to 6, and if you can, write which countries are which. So I will give you the first one. So if we have a look at 6, that is France. You could use your planners. There's a map at the back to help you with this, or you could do a little bit of internet research to help you with this task. Task 2, in your books, write 2 headings. So these are the 2 sides of World War I. So with the Triple Entente, and I want you to write a list of the Triple Entente, so they're all the countries in blue, and under the other heading, write all the countries linked to the Triple Alliance. So the Triple Alliance, all the countries in red. And your challenge, if these were the main countries involved in World War I, why in the previous video did they mention 135 countries involved in World War I? You will need to use your previous knowledge of empires to help you answer this question. So again, pause the videos, complete the task. I estimate that this will take you 10 minutes. Brilliant, well done on completing those tasks, and even better if you manage to complete the challenge as well. You can check your answers using this slide. So let's link back to our big themes. So remember, alongside all of our topics that we've studied through history, we always come back to these big themes that can help to pull the topics together. So remember, we addressed these at the beginning of the lesson: power, beliefs, ordinary lives, and cultural encounters. And your task, now that we know a little bit about World War I, is to make some predictions about how these big themes link to our topic of World War I. So if we think about cultural encounters, and I've done the example here for you, British soldiers fighting side by side with soldiers from other parts of the empire, for example, India, would be a really good example of cultural encounters in World War I. Perhaps you'll want to be able to address power, and perhaps you want to link back to some of the key words that we've addressed at the start of this lesson: beliefs and ordinary lives. Don't worry if you can't remember, you can't do all of them. We're just making a prediction for each of the big themes. But we will come back to the big themes, as we always do, throughout our study of World War I. Well done on completing your first lesson on World War I and as a bit of an introduction to World War I. I'm going to watch a short video here to give us a bit of an idea on what is coming up in our next lesson. Does this clip give you any clues about the cause of war? Perhaps write down a couple of bullet points about the causes of war, which is what we're going to be studying in our next lesson.
One bullet from a young Serbian's gun has triggered the spark for World War I, but how did one shot prove so lethal as to kill over 17 million people? It's time for the history bomb of World War I. Let's set the scene. Late 19th century Germany was booming, but there were signs of a storm brewing. Her Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II had plans to teach his rivals a lesson.
Now Deutschland is high, but I'll take her higher. 1/3 to Sullivan's Empire. Like Britain, I will see und Land. Watch out for this Vaterland.
It's worth pointing out that the Kaiser was mentally unstable, but unfortunately for the rest of Europe, he was in charge. Germany's name is starting to take
In
notice.
Russia, have you heard this guy? I'm thinking of putting my army on standby.
I know, cousin Willie is giving me nausea, and now he signed an agreement with Austria.
So tell her when we've got your back, we'll be here if the Kaiser attacks.
It was against this backdrop that Gavrilo Princip, a young Serbian nationalist, shot dead Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, setting off a terrible chain of events. Are you ready? Let's go. Austria and Germany attack into Serbia, who are allies with Russia. Didn't mention that earlier. Russia gets ready to advance, and now brings in their pals, young France. Germany attack France as quick as they can, adopts an approach called the Schlieffen Plan. They go through Belgium, awful decision, as Belgium have friends, namely Great Britain. In come Italy. Now let's join the advance with the first British troops fighting in France.
Get down, boys, we must take cover, or be more machine gun fodder. Good Lord, those howitzer shells are big. Without delay, quick chaps, dig!
By November 1914, 400 miles of barbed wire and mud stretched from the Alps to Belgium. Commonwealth soldiers arrived from Australia, Africa and India, but still more troops were needed.
Men of Britain, there's much to do. Your time is now. Your country needs you.
Sir, we've just had news from Gallipoli.
Ah, yes, against the Turk. A resounding victory.
No, sir, 500,000 casualties and a telegram. Send help,
Oh,
please.
dear.
Back in the trenches, there was more to fear as chemical weapons began to appear.
Gas, elixir, fumbling, no mask. A damn cloth's better than nothing.
Sir, I can't see the gas things and
Come here, soldier. Let's get you to a nurse.
Behind the front line, volunteer nurses tended to the injured soldiers. Both at home and on the front line, women made tremendous contributions to the war effort.
Hold still, deep breaths, I'll soon be through. It's barbaric what they've done to you.
Oh, thank you, miss. You're a real pearl. God, these trenches, no place for a girl.
Neither are they fit for a man, but we're here to help the best we can. And who do you think manufactured your gun? Us girls will see this war is won.
1916 saw terrible losses on the Western Front. The Germans advanced to Verdun and the British went forward to the Somme, but neither battle proved decisive. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Russians were achieving some successes.
Sir, news from the Russian army.
Blimey, that pigeon's flown a long way. Let me guess, they've been pushed back.
No, actually, they've had a good crack. General Brusilov makes good progress. His wide attacks put Fritz under stress. He's advanced no less than 60 miles.
Superb, great news. I like your style.
Oh, hang on. And now his attack's been stalled. German reserves have been called.
Oh, blast.
It would take new tactics and technology to break the deadlock on either front. In 1917, Germany made a fatal calculation by pursuing a ruinous naval strategy.
This war has gone on long enough. It's time for Deutschland to get tough. The Allies need imports to stay alive. Cut these off or they cannot survive.
German U-boats attacked Allied shipping to cut off supply. Critically, they attacked American ships, and in response, the United States declared war on Germany. It
It would take another year, however, for American troops to actually arrive in Europe. In the meantime, a Russian revolutionary seized his moment.
My Russian brothers, listen in. Let me introduce myself. Vladimir Lenin. I promise to take this country far. But first, we need to kick out the Tsar. Good, that was easy. Now everyone's equal. We'll have bread, land, and peace for the people. I think Mother Russia's had enough of this war. I'll meet with the Germans to settle this score.
The meeting took place in November 1917, and Russian land was divided by Germany into independent states, including the Ukraine. With Russia now out of the war, the Germans moved all efforts to the Western Front and planned a colossal effort in the spring of 1918. Ultimately, the offensive failed, and at this pivotal moment, the Americans finally arrived.
Hey, what's up? No photographs, please. We got your memo and... Geez, things have gotten out of hand. Good thing you called up Uncle Sam. The enemy had better reach for the skies and light it up like the 4th of July.
You idiot! By May 1918, 200,000 American troops were arriving per month, and after withstanding the German offensive, new technology and tactics proved decisive for the Allies.
Right, chaps. This is it. We have orders to make the hit. Keep behind the tanks. Use the Lewis gun. A creeping barrage will shatter the Hun. Our planes will protect from the skies. Then we'll hold the line until support arrives.
Finally, the Allies got some traction, putting the Germans out of action. At 11 a.m. on the 11th of November, the guns fell silent upon German surrender. All in all, a tragic loss. Europe secured, but at what cost? A generation lost. We are forever in debt. 100 years hence, lest we forget.
Hopefully that video will provide you with some insight about what is coming next in our following lessons about World War I. So just to finish off, I'd like you just to finish off these sentences, just to show off what you've already learned this lesson. So here are the sentence starters, and you're to finish them off. And there's a challenge at the bottom. But again, well done on completing your first online lesson of history, and I look forward to planning and creating the next lessons on World War I and receiving your work from these lessons.